Dr. Olangudu Ashimolo, VP Operations, Dr. Maurice Shimolo, VP in charge of risk, dear colleagues, staff members of EBID, invited guests, all protocol observed. You are welcome to this webinar. My name is Anita Somda Tala, in charge of communication at EBID, and I'm happy to welcome all of you at this webinar dedicated for private sector operators who are working with EBID. I would like to remind you that we have interpretation services for English and in French. Have a look at your screen and select the language of your choice to follow the webinar in the language of your choice. All along the year 2024, we have been engaged with the ECOWAS Investment Forum, where EBID has taken stock of all economic points that were raised during the just ended forum. We have also been able to organize a youth forum where we discussed infrastructure gaps, the need for the youth for the ECOWAS sub-region. The last November, we were also able to organize the President Roundtable that was aired at Metro TV in the Republic of Ghana. Today, we are here once again at this webinar where we are trying to discuss together with you, our stakeholders, the practical guides of private sector operations. We believe that this webinar will be a wonderful platform for both the bank and the bank's own partners. We will first and foremost be having a welcome address by the Vice President in charge of operations. On behalf of the President of EBID, Dr. Nana Ajekum Donko. This will be followed by a presentation of the practical guide of private sector operators, specifically put together for private sector operators. And this will be presented by one of our experts in the private sector department. After this presentation, we will now go into questions and answers section. I welcome you all to ask very relevant questions. You can also ask your questions in the chat room or in the question and answers window. This will be followed by the closure of the webinar by a closing remarks by an authority from EBID. On this note, may I welcome Dr. Olangudu Ashimolo, the Vice President in charge of operations of EBID. Thank you very much, Madam Anita. Thank you for your remarks. Just as Madam Anita said, we have interpretation. Therefore, I will proceed to make my intervention in English. Under your screen, you have the option of selecting between English and in French. Interpreters are on the call to provide you with quality interpretation.
At this point,
services.
I want to acknowledge the presence of all the company's chief executives present here this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are joining from. We also acknowledge the presence of the captains of industry in the entire ECOWAS region joining us. We acknowledge the presence of the EBID management and staff, especially the vice president in charge of risk and control for the bank. We also recognize the presence of all the distinguished guests, members of the press joining us today. Please let me, on behalf of the president of the bank, Dr. George Ajekudonko, he is also the chairman of the board of directors of EBID, welcome you sincerely to this webinar. It is my pleasure that we are talking to you today on the practical guide for private sector economic operators, especially in the ECOWAS sub-region. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide the guide to all the private sector operators in the sub-region with essential information for the preparation and submission of loan applications to your bank, the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development. It is important to note that after today's presentation, this information will also be readily available to you and is captured by EBID's practical guide for private sector economic operators, which will be shared with all our partners and is also available on the bank's website. Another goal of this webinar today is to shed some light on the private sector operational activities of EBID, your bank, to share more on the bank's private sector services, as well as its developmental impact in the sectors across the ECOWAS sub-region. EBID, as you know, the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, understand that strengthening the private sector drives economic growth and reduces poverty by promoting industrialization and creating job opportunities to increase national output while supporting public sector initiatives. Therefore, investing in the private sector has always been a top priority in EBID's strategic vision of addressing the socioeconomic challenges in the ECOWAS sub-region. As at now, more than 60% of EBID's financing is directed towards supporting the growth of the private sector enterprises and have been intentional about supporting SMEs and SMIs, who are the main backbone of any growing economy. The aim of this investment in the ECOWAS member states is to promote innovation and ensure sustainable growth and development. This webinar therefore serves as an important platform through which the bank can keep the private sector informed of the funding opportunities that are available to them. I want to touch on some of our areas of intervention. The first of them is healthcare and pharmaceuticals, education, water and sanitation, service industry, that is the hospitality industry as well as the banking industry, energy, more and more we are going into renewable energy, industry, depending on any industry, we are there, mining and transportation. Today at the bank, our major currencies of lending are the US dollar, the euro, or the ZOF. And we are willing to support you to as much as possible, so far as your businesses can accommodate a minimum of $5 million or its equivalent in the other two currencies. The average tenure for our facility is starting from about 2 years. We can go as far as up to 10 years, depending on the specific nature of your projects. Some of you may be aware, where some may not be. We have a number of success stories across the sub-region today in the entire ECOWAS space. One of the key success stories of EBID is the EcoBank Group. EcoBank today has its footprint in more than 39 countries across the world. The humble beginning of that institution started in our building in Lume many years ago, and we are still supporting them today. Another success story that we've had in the EBID institution is that organization called ASCAI. ASCAI is now becoming an household name when it comes to airline business in the entire African space today. Most of the commercial banks in all of the West African countries today are clients. In terms of microfinance, we have quite a number of them in most of the countries as well. When you talk of hotel, the Azalai Group, Hotel de Février, Marriott Hotel, Kempinski, Radisson Blue, all of them. They are some of the success stories recorded in EBID. When you look at Capro Industry, Deckel Oil, Nada Oil, Premier Milling Corporation, Satrec, Diamond Cement, Institut National Ivoirien des Entreprises in Côte d'Ivoire, Zepitic, Itema LNG, African Food Security, and most of the leading petroleum suppliers in Mali today are our key clients. Also, we have a number of ongoing projects, especially in renewable energy, transportation, healthcare in almost all the countries of West Africa. We really want to thank you this afternoon for willing to join us as partners in the development of our ECOWAS sub-region and for creating time out of your very busy schedule to join us in this webinar today. Our continued commitment to promote the growth of the private sector is unflinching. I want to assure you that we are willing to do so, to extend a hand of fellowship to organizations like yourself to ensure that we're able to create jobs and reduce poverty encourage financial empowerment in the entire sub-region in ECOWAS. My colleague, Mr. Dokwas, has been mentioned, will be giving you detailed explanation on how you can benefit from our private sector window of operation, and I will be willing to take your questions and clarifications at the end of this webinar. Thank you so much once again, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for your attention and participation, and I wish all of us the very best. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, VPO, for your welcome remarks. To shed light on the activities of EBID in the private sector, as well as the EBID's impact on the ECOWAS sub-region, we will be welcoming Mr. Boko Celestin for his presentation in that regard. Thank you very much, Madam Anita. Honorable Directors, the Vice President in charge of operations, dear participants, all protocol observed. I would like to thank all of you for making it possible to grant us your presence at this webinar. This webinar is being organized in the framework of promoting collaboration between the bank and the private sector in order for us to champion the development of the sub-region. My presentation this morning will be done in three folds. The first one will be showcasing all the bank's interventions in the private sector, something that the Vice President in charge of operations has already made reference to. I will also show you the services as well as the areas of intervention of the bank, as well as our level of commitment in the private sector till date. This will be followed by a presentation of a guide. The guide that is readily available on our website, and I'll also be going in details of the guide to give you proper understanding of how you could benefit from the services of the bank. And finally, the most important part will be the questions and answer section. We would like to listen to your concerns. We would like to know your problems so that we can better support you, because you are the very essence of the existence of EBID. It is your bank. We are in business because of you. In order to begin with, EBID and its private sector department is involved in a number of sectors: infrastructure, industry, services, and energy. In order to remain in business, the bank provides economic operators a number of services and products. Now, in terms of resources, we have two categories of resources that we provide to you. First and foremost, we have debt services as well as participations. In terms of debt, we could also have short-term and medium-term facilities. And for short-term facilities, this could be for trade finance and others. We can also deal directly with a counterparty. But given the necessity of proximity in our banking sector today, and the fact that we want to be closer to our client, we now use more refinancing lines. So these are facilities that we put or provide to commercial banks for them to on-lend them to their respective private sectors. This is simply because across board, the West African economic landscape is made up to 80% of SMEs, SMIs. That is why EBID will lend to commercial banks, and they in turn will on-lend to the SMEs and SMIs. We also finance major flagship projects. In so doing, we'll bring on board other stakeholders to also co-finance such projects. We also have another facilities that we call participation in shareholdings. This could be directly or indirectly. Now, directly, EBID finances some community projects, and then also through investment funds. In order for us to support companies in their quest to recapitalize themselves in order to be financially worthy to implement capital-intensive projects. We also have the guarantee product, which we are not doing much because of the trends in the market today. But it is important for us to mention it to you so that you know that we provide such services. Now, in addition to all these services that we provide, I can say that as of the 31st of June 2024, EBID in the private sector has invested more than 1 billion USD in the private sector across board. And their distribution is presented in the table, as you can see. And as I said, the indirect intervention is made through the lines that we provide to the commercial banks to support the private sector operators in their respective countries. As I said, EBID's commitment in the sub-region is distributed per country as follows. When you critically look at the table, you can see that it isn't because we love one country to the detriment to the other. That is why some countries have higher engagement than others, but it all depends on the economic strength of the country. Secondly, in terms of sector-based distributions, we can mention that we invest in agriculture. Contrary to what many people would think, we have agriculture, energy, industry, as well as trade through trade financing. Concerning the overall structure of the guide, as I said already, the guide is on the website. You could take a reading of them and then contact us later for clarifications. The guide provides you adequate information to contact EBID. The EBID also outlines areas of intervention, the criteria, as well as modalities of EBID intervention, as well as lines and a comprehensive list of products and services we provide. EBID team is always available to provide you the necessary clarification that you may need. Now, how do you contact EBID? In the private sector, we are more interested in the private sectors. As you know, EBID has two windows. We have the private sector and the public sector. We, in the private sector operations, we are more concerned about private sector operators our brothers in the public sector, they also deal with public enterprises. But today we are more interested in how we can equip private sectors to take advantage of EBID operations. We also will deal with any other organization that is in business to make profit. Now, how do you contact EBID? You must first and foremost make a request addressed to the president of EBID. And this request must be accompanied by a number of documentations. And we will provide you with the list of that document. The same list is also available in the guide online. Another important issue is that in addition to the request to the president of EBID, you must also undertake a feasibility studies and a business plan to show that your line of business is commercially viable. We also will need you to provide information on your organization or on your business. You must also provide us with the team and their profiles. Having a business idea is one thing, but making sure that such a business idea is well implemented is another. That is why EBID is more interested in knowing the people who will be managing the fund, the people who will be able to champion your business idea so that at the end of the day, you should be able to pay us back. Now, for existing companies, we will need you to provide us with audited financial statements for the past 3 years. We also do know that in today's business world, environmental and social safeguard issues are important. That is why you should be able to provide us with an environmental and social impact assessment as a key requirement, not only from the bank, but also from our international partners. It is for this reason that EBID has a dedicated unit that is in charge of environmental and social safeguards. Therefore, such a document must form part and parcel of your application to the bank. It is also part of the guarantees that we need from you in order for us to begin to consider your request. Now, concerning trade, we are talking about quick turnarounds for import and export. Now, what I can say here is that as a development bank, we want to be complementary to commercial banks that are in charge more of these trade finance activities. That is why EBID strategically positioned itself in supporting commercial banks. We finance the importation of products such as fertilizer and agricultural inputs, as well as other strategic goods, in order for us to ensure that the sub-region has food security to feed its people. We also be more interested in the structure of your operations, as well as certificate of performance of past operations and businesses. We also need past contracts or existing contracts that you have with other business collaborators. Now, for financial and banking institutions, and even for non-banking institutions, we insist that you send a request of financing to the president with a list of documentations that I mentioned earlier. I've already mentioned the areas of intervention. I mentioned infrastructure, industry, services, energy, and the types of intervention I've mentioned that already. We have short and long-term loans. We have lines of credit that we give to banks, to on lend, to SMEs, SMIs. We also have participation directly or indirectly. We have a guarantee as well as structuring of financing, as well as assistance and financial services to the private sector operators, something that we are doing already to many other ECOWAS institutions, such as the PPDU and what have you. Now, what are the key points? This is where we have some misunderstanding among our stakeholders. And once again, this webinar is to shed light on this so that we understand ourselves, so that when you, the private sector operators, you come to the bank, you should have clear understanding of what you need, how to access them for us to be more interested in your project. Now, we are in a market economy, as you know, and the resources that we give you are resources that we also go and raise from the international financial markets. Therefore, we are very particular about the rate. And those resources we raise, we come and give them to you as economic operators. Those resources are not the bank's own resources, because EBID, as a development bank, we also have to pay back those loans we take from international markets. It is therefore important that we are very specific about when we put the money, how the monies are used, and we must also ensure that the loans are paid back. That is a key characteristic of a market economy. In market economy, supply and demands must always meet. That is why when you bring your request, you must be able to prove to us that there is a demand for whatever services or goods you want to deal in. Regardless of how wonderful your business idea is, regardless of the profile of your people, there is no bank that will give you resources without knowing whether there are demands for your business or not. You must also understand that in the market economy, there is competition. Therefore, we are interested in knowing what are you doing differently. The sector itself must be an economically viable sector. Let me take an instance. You know, in the ITC sector, trends change quickly. As a matter of fact, like a speed of light. So if you come to us as an IT solution company, we want to know how you can quickly adapt to change. We also want to know if you are a company that is interested in importing or processing the raw materials. We want to know whether you have a sure source of your raw materials. Environmental issues are also key. That is why we pay more attention to that. Not to hide anything from you, there are some resources that we ourselves go and raise, and environmental safeguard issues are key components of the conditions that we ourselves must meet. That is why if you do not give us clear guidelines on your environmental policies, we are sorry we may not be able to help you. In our intervention policies, and given the fact that we are not a commercial bank, we ask that in our financing schedule, there should be a local bank. And for reasons already mentioned, one is then for proximity purposes and also for us to share the risk. We also provide other support that promoters always forget. And every bank across the whole world have some criteria in terms of the contribution of the promoter's own resources to a project. Now, for us in EBID, if it's an existing project and you are asking us to expand your project, either for rehabilitation or the expansion of your business, we will ask that the promoter should at least contribute 15% of the total cost of the project in financing the project. And to be more specific, there are components where no bank will finance. These are something like amortized expenditure. Now, to end on this very point, we must look at the profitability of the projects. If the project is not profitable, we will not give you loans, simply because we do not want to give you money to destroy more money instead of creating wealth. That is why you must ensure that whatever project you are presenting to the bank should be profitable, so that you will be able to pay back the loan. Now, we are zooming on the promoter himself. What is the promoter's experience in the sector? What we normally refer to as the track records. This is very important. What is the credibility of the promoter? Today, based on the experience we have as a development bank, the issue of character is very important. It is true that there are some promoters who are known for not paying back their loans. If you go to a bank and take a loan and you decide not to pay, then you are a bad businessman or woman. Regardless of how beautiful and how well crafted your business ideas are, we will not give you money if your character is doubtful. Because in entrepreneurship, we deal with risk. And if your risk is too high, in that case, we will not be able to help you. We also pay attention to technical partnership. Now, if you are a business person delving into a new field where you have less experience, we want to know who are your partners, your technical partners. Are they well equipped enough? Are they able to support you in the implementation of your business? As I said earlier, we always want to work with you together with a local bank in the picture in order for us to share the risk, so that they will also be able to support you in the running expenditure of your business. It is true that there are guarantees. We always will insist on guarantees, but guarantees do not finance projects. That is why you must be sure that the project is viable enough, create enough wealth, even before we talk about guarantees. I can tell you that sometimes we reject projects, even if the guarantee is good enough, because the project itself, we are not convinced that they can generate enough revenues to pay back the loan. There are a lot of things that we can talk about, but I would like at this juncture to proceed.
On the maximum amount we can give a maximum of 10% of the maximum of the amount. If it's possible to request a waiver to the from the board of directors to go to the minimum is $5 million, but there are also levels of intervention in projects, as I've stated in the funding plan. Generally, we cannot go be above 50% of the total cost. That is the duty-free cost of the project, regarding project for expansion for existing project. If the project is sufficiently good, we can go up to 80% of the total duty-free cost of the project. The interest rate, the duration, it depends. It depends on the type of resources available. I should also recall that as a bank, we have to mobilize resources on the international market to be able to address the concerns that the demand. So these are the conditions for which we give. For the lines of credit, the maximum amount is usually the 10%. The conditions generally are consistent with the resources that we have. For trade finance, 10% of the effective resources, and the conditions are the same, but based on the trade finance sector, which is short term, the maximum duration we can give is 2 years. But if the client is performing, these are things we can renew. For equity participation, 15% of the share capital and 5% of the own resources. But for participation in equity, also depend on the strategic nature of the project for the bank. On this note, I thank you for your attention, and we look forward to your questions or concerns so that we can discuss and know each other better. Thank you. We thank Mr. Bokor for this brilliant presentation, which I hope has enabled you to know the position of the bank better, which intends to strengthen the private sector and reduce poverty, normally through industrialization and creating jobs, and to support the private sector initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we will now listen to you and address the question, and we call on you to send in your question on the Q&A section. As of date, there's no question in the question and A section. Since the webinar is on live, we would have question, Mr. Boko. I would read the questions one after the other, and then you would be able to bring some insight on the questions raised. The first question: what are the major financial indicators or characteristics of projects which EBID has priority when it analyzes the request from the private sector, particularly regarding from emerging markets? Can we provide answer after each question? Yes, you can. The financial indicators and the characteristics on the market, I don't know what it means by emerging market, but universally, as I mentioned, the project must be viable and it must be profitable. The profitability, it means that when we have mentioned some criteria in the internal rate of the return, the net value, PNV, the internal rate of return, it should be properly, adequately higher to the average rate of resources, which is the debt and the own resources. In addition, furthermore, this rate should be 1.5 times, that is in a weighted nature, it should be higher. When it is 1.5 higher or twice higher, the average cost of capital, that is to say, including debt and own resources. This further comforts the banker. Furthermore, there's the issue of solvency, and here we look at the rate of coverage of debt servicing ratio. So we want to know, can this ratio, is it twice or 3 times or 4 times higher, the debt servicing ratio? If the ratio is higher, it further reassures the banker. But once again, on a strict standpoint, I think we look at ratio that stands at 2 to 3% and beyond, above, twice, 2 times or 3 times. So if it's possible for him to further explain what he means by emerging market, he would have enabled us to know what to tell him. But generally, these are the financial indicators which we look at to assess the profitability and the solvency of a project. And as I stated, these are part of the criteria which we look at as, from a financial and economic standpoint. Thank you. We have another question from Mr. Nikele. Dr. Mike wants to give true insight to that answer or the question that was on the floor.
Thank you very much, Anita. I think just to add to what Mr. Boko said, the project viability is very key to us, and then also to ensure that in terms of how long the project will be able to generate enough cash flow to be able to pay the debt and also service other operational costs. I think a very key financial indicator is debt service coverage ratio. That is the ability of the project to generate cash flow before taxes and interest. So we are looking at your EBITDA level to see how your EBITDA will be able to finance your debt. So that ratio is very key. I think the standard we have here is about 1.33 for debt service coverage ratio. Then also in terms of leverage, we need to also talk about leverage because as I think he indicated earlier on, we do not finance transaction 100%. There has to be some level of contribution from the promoter. So we look at also this equity ratio, which is very key. I think generally we look at, if it's a green field, we are looking at up to 25, minimum of 25%, and if it's a already going concern, or then that one would be about 15%. So these are some of the things that we also look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mike, for this insight. We would now take the next question. Is a question from Mr. Mikeli. He said, what are the criteria for segmentation of companies between SME or big companies? According to EBID, what do you do to segment company as either a big company or an SME? For the segmentation, we adopt segmentation as put in place by the organs of the community, notably ECOWAS and few more. So it depends on the level of business turnover. It also depends on the number of employment created, the form of risk, and so on and so forth. It should also be stated that there are lots of criteria that are taken into account, but we as a development bank we do not go into a small companies, small enterprises. That's why we focus on the level of needs, and so as such we use minimum amounts, which is the threshold of $5 million. as need. But once again, the business turnover is important at any rate, because to give you $5 million, it means that you have a business turnover that is far higher. That is how we do in terms of segmentation, categorization. So we work in line with the criteria that are put in place by financial by institutions, namely ECOWAS and UMOA. The next question is a question. Dr. Mike has his hand raised once again.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. I think maybe just to expatiate a little bit on what Mr. Boko just said. Definition of category of or segmentation of company depends on countries. What is SME in Nigeria is not the same as SME in Ghana. So when you say we look at definition of West African, we're talking about the country definition of SME. That's what we rely on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mike, for that clarification. The next question comes from Ms. Mbaji. Do you finance directly private operators? If yes, he explains that his project, I won't go into details. He says his project. Do you finance directly private sector operators? Maybe you should explain more what we understand by private sector operators. Okay, we understand it means direct financing. In the understanding, that is what we refer to as direct financing. Direct financing. So today, if the man has a project, he can contact us directly. We give him resources. But we have what is known as indirect intervention. And as I stated, our economic fiber is comprises a lot of SME. And since EBID is not able to be so close to clients in all the countries, we prefer to collaborate with commercial banks that are generally very close to the clients by making onto them the commercial bank resources in order to meet the demands, the needs of SME. But I can say that we can finance directly. That is when I pointed to our realizing intervention, I said 35% of our intervention are direct finances to entrepreneurs. They are direct financing. He is asking, how can one submit his financing request to EBID? How we would come to the presentation? I mean, you submit your application, your file to the president of EBID, a funding request, and you explain briefly your project, the cost of your project, the needs, the financing needs, supported with some documents which I had listed out, notably the feasibility studies or the business plan, as well as the legal documents, your articles of association, your certificate of incorporation. If it's a project that requires environmental and social impact studies, you can find all of these. The list of documentation that has to be attached, and he can come to EBID, or maybe today, with the online communication means, you can submit it by mail to EBID, and we will handle that. Ms. Mbachi, I hope you've received the answer. We urge you to download the the guide for private sector operators. You can find it. Mr. Also Odoyinyepa is asking a question: do you support private sector operators who have contracts with the state? If that's the case, to which of the windows are they supposed to submit their applications? We can't provide assistance to them, but it would depend on who is borrowing. Because as of date, in the market funding schemes, the state may ask the business operator to borrow resources. In that case, he would contact us, and so we would analyze his application based on that on the input of the request. But if it is the state itself that is borrowing, then it will go to the public sector window. So once again, I'm saying that we can support a private sector operator if the state asks him to search for a resource. So we would analyze it based on the criteria of the private sector. The next question comes from Mr. Suleiman John. He wants to know, for the expansion of an agro-industrial project, what are the various factors to be taken into account? What is the due diligence process, and what is the average duration for this due diligence? Let me start with the average duration of a treatment processing of this. That duration depends generally on the promoters. Why do I say as such? As you would have noticed, when you submit your funding request to EBID, there's a documentation that will be given. Generally, that's where the problem, because we need to receive the documentation. And usually, when we look for this documentation, the information are not available. So the more the information are not available, the more it takes time. But generally, when all is well, within 3 months, you can obtain an approval for your request. When the entire documentation is available, all the relevant information are available, within 3 months, you can obtain approval for a funding request. But for an agro-industrial project, we will look at your historical performance. We will look at your skill, the knowledge that you have, the market, your experience, your capacity to secure the supply in the event where it has to do with processing. And when all these information are available, normally we should be able to proceed with the project. Thank you, Mr. Boko. We have another question from the set. This time it's in English. I suppose that is an English listener. I would have called on my brother Mike to address this question. Dr. Mike, could you please provide answer?
All right. Thank you very much. I think we need to start from the point that EBID has already been indicated is a development bank. So our goal is to ensure that member countries are developed in a manner which meets international standards. I think we've already enumerated a number of things that we need as a bank. Now, I think some of the key things in this developmental agenda is job creation. We are looking at, I think Mr. Boko mentioned environmental, climate change, green fund, and also projects relating to solar, wind, etc., etc. So we need to, for a private sector, you need to be ensured that whatever that you are providing for funding is in line with the sectors, priority sectors that we've already put across. This can be found in our website, and then at a request, we can also help you to get it. But these are sectors that we have carefully selected to ensure that they meet these international developmental goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mike, for this clarification. We have another question from Mr. Mbaji, who is asking, what do you accept as guarantee contribution? Generally, contribution guarantee, you have the financial guarantee. That's the first thing. If we can get that, that's good. But apart from that, we have mortgages that is on properties. We have collateral when generally we are financing assets. We talk about we're talking about the collateralization of those equipment that are being financed. When it has to do with trade finance, we have said that there must be you must put in place a cash of about minimum of 10%. In addition to that, you have the contribution of the key the principal partner. So based on the risk that would have to be taken, we assess. Generally, that's a kind of guarantee we accept, and also particularly structure the transaction with the view to enable us to be able to control the inflows of the project. Thank you, Mr. Boko. We have another question that is being handled by Dr. Mike. So since the webinar is supposed to be 1 hour, we've been together for 1 hour. We would ask if there are other persons who would want to take the floor, or they would want to take the floor. If you want to say something, you may please click on the icon to raise your hand. If you have something to say, you wish to say something. I see no hand has been raised. Every good thing comes to an end. We would then come to the end of this webinar, but I would want to say that we will take a satisfaction survey at the end of this webinar in order to enable us to assess what we've just presented to you, and so that we can meet your expectation next week. To round off this webinar, we will give the floor once again to the Vice President Operations.
Thank you so much,
Dr.
Anita,
Olabumi.
and thanks so much to our partners that have joined this call. There have been some responses to your request on the chat box, but for the benefit of those of us who are in transit who are not joining through the chat box, I just want to mention that to submit your application today, we have made life easier for our clients. You can submit your application via email. Our email address written on the chat box is bbidc@bidc-ebid.org. En français, BBEDC@bedc-obed.org for the benefit of those of us who want to submit our application online through email. Having said that, once again, I want to thank everybody for your participation this afternoon. We quite appreciate your interest in working with EBID, the Development Bank of the ECOWAS Group, to bring development to the doorstep of our citizens in all of the 15 countries. It's a task that we can do. And one thing that gives us joy in the bank is the fact that for every dollar invested in our community, we know that we are helping in a little way to bring people out of poverty and empowering our citizens. So it's something that we want to keep doing, and we want to assure you all of your requests will be treated by the bank. So on this note, I appreciate everybody present this afternoon, the CEOs, the industry leaders, captains of industry, executives of banks, even some of our clients, I can see them online. Please, we thank you so much. We appreciate your support and the fact that you want to work with EBID to develop our sub-region. Once again, on behalf of the president of the bank, Dr. George Donko, and the management, supported by the VP Risk and my good self, we want to say we appreciate you so much for the support, and we look forward to doing business with you. On this note, I pass the floor to Madam Anita to round up the session. Thank you so much.
VPO, we thank you all for your presence and for your active participation, and we urge you to follow up on our news and events at EBID by going to our website, and you can also but you can see the address is www.bedc-ebid.org, and we are also available on the social network, and we urge you to download the tactical guide for the private sector operators. Thank you, and excellent afternoon to everyone.